Hey everyone, thanks very much for joining us today in the Pulse College room. Our next guest here is Derek Tyler Attico. Thank you very much for joining us today. And where are you calling in from, Derek, over in the States? Whereabouts are you based?
Hey, I'm sorry. Hey, thank you very much for having me. Right now I'm in Chicago. I'm having a great time. It's really great for you having me. I'm excited. I know we've been talking about this. I'm excited to talk to all of your fans and talk to everyone over in Dublin. I am the two-time winner of the Star Trek Strange New Worlds anthology contest. I'm a science fiction author. I'm the author of the upcoming autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, coming out October 10th. And I'm really excited to talk about this book and what I've done and about Star Trek in general with you.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's actually thanks to the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko that you first came on my radar, because I'm such a fan of that series. I think it began with David A. Goodman, began with the autobiography of James Kirk, and then followed up with Jean-Luc Picard. Una McCormick came in, did Captain Janeway and Spock.
Right.
And now you're coming in now for Benjamin Sisko. And I'm just like, and for me, I have to confess, I'm a Star Trek fan, but I am a late Star Trek fan. And it was actually the autobiography of James Kirk that was my gateway into Star Trek. And it was really curious because folks I know who are diehard fans, I don't think the autobiography resonated as well with them, because they said, oh, it just feels like it's listing off old episodes. For me, though, it gave me extra layers that when to go back and watch the old episodes. So that was my gateway. And since then, I've seen TOS, Next Gen, DS9, still working my way through some of the newer stuff and even later stuff, because there's nearly 1,000 episodes, I think, worth of content out there. But this is such an exciting project for me. I just can't wait to read it. But I have one burning question that I have to begin with, which was, I understand in the way they do the series, the verisimilitude is wonderful. Mm-hmm. You as the author are credited as the editor, and then of course the characters are the authors, and that's a fantastic.
That's right.
I have to wonder, was there ever a consideration that it would be a biography which Jake would have written? Did that ever cross minds? I was always going to be an autobiography. That was something that as soon as I was kind of curious.
That's a great question, and you'll have to wait and see.
Oh,
I don't know. You'll have to wait and see.
Oh no, that's it. Say no more. Say no more. I look forward to it. I look forward to it. Absolutely. And what was it like? What was it like for you to get that gig? It's with Titan Books now. At least it's over here in Ireland and UK. Titan Books, same over stateside, yeah.
No, absolutely. It's with Titan Books. And just to roll back really quick, to what you were saying about this being your gateway into Star Trek. I wrote the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko actually with that in mind, so that someone that's never come to Star Trek before, or maybe knows like a little bit about it from their childhood or anything, they can read the autobiography of Benjamin Sisko and have like maybe a little bit of an idea of Star Trek and some familiarity with it, and then go to Deep Space Nine and be fine, or go to or really go to any series of Star Trek and be fine. Or, of course, the consummate fan of Deep Space Nine can read the autobiography and feel at home. So I did that intentionally so that almost anyone, or pretty much anyone, can come to the biography and find something that will pull them in and hopefully make them feel at home. And I thought that was the best way, so that it would be inviting to everyone and anyone, and to answer your question, it's Titan Books, and how I got the gig was in 2016. I wrote my second Star Trek short story. My first was in 2005, which was for the Strange New Worlds anthology, which was an anthology that was by Simon and Schuster Pocket Books, and it was a contest where fans would just send in short stories, and usually it was about 10 short stories that were picked, and the best of those short stories that were sent in were picked. 10 were picked, and they were published once a year. And those short stories have gone on to basically launch careers. Dayton Ward is one of the, I think, or the perhaps the most famous. He's now been writing for about, I guess, 15, 20 years easy for Star Trek literature. My first was in 2005, the short story Alpha and Omega. And then again in 2016, I wrote a Sisko story, The Dreamer in the Dream. And that story did really well. It was for the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. And what happened was a few years after that, someone was doing a podcast, and they said, well, there has been no Sisko autobiography. And someone on the internet said, well, hey, this guy Attico did a Sisko story in Strange New Worlds. He'd be great for the autobiography. That the powers that be heard about that, and that kind of got like my name in the ether. And then I guess when it came time, Titan heard about it, and then they approached me, and I said, "Heck yeah, I'm interested."
And that's actually a great thing about Star Trek as well, which I suppose depends on your point of view. Some may feel intimidated. I'm a bit like this when it comes to comic books. So I'm an avid comic reader as well, and
Same here, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes the X-Men books. So for
Right.
me, like that is, I don't know where to. That's a beast unto itself a bit. And with something like franchise like Star Trek, sometimes you're like, okay, whereabouts to begin? And if you like something and you're in between seasons, like maybe at this time of recording, there's one episode left in season 2 is Strange New Worlds. So maybe folks like, okay, where can I go for tie-in material or to continued stories? And Star Trek has this great history of novelizations going back to the original, and some of the original TOS authors contributed then to the TOS staff writers, I should say, contributed to like novels and vice versa from novels to the series. What would you say for folks coming into it, like if in terms of like accessing novels, Star Trek novels, were there any like go-to favorites for yourself? For me, Falcon Glory was great. Did you ever read that one? That was always by DC.
Oh, no. Wow. Well, there to date, there's over 800 novels. All right, Star Trek novels, going from Simon and Schuster, and this is including pocket books, Titan. I mean, and I'm going back from I believe the mid 70s to now. That's a number of 800, including past and present authors. So there's so many to begin with. I honestly I couldn't tell you where to start. There are a few. Dayton Ward, David Mack, they just finished tying up their Star Trek universe, because the Star Trek universe has evolved and changed so much, and with the emergence of I guess we could say the new era or the 25th century of Star Trek in Picard, and it moving forward on screen now and in canon, what that has caused is that a lot of those new ideas and fresh ideas in canon, it's caused a lot of the things that has happened in the novels to change. So David Mack, Dayton Ward, and a lot of these authors have kind of basically closed the circle or ended the circle of a lot of their ideas and a lot of their storylines in what they were doing in a really great trilogy, I believe. So that was really great. I'm sorry. You want to?
Is that Star Trek Coda was the
Coda, right? I'm looking at them right here. I have them, and I'm happy to push these guys' work. I have Coda Book 1.
Yep.
Right? And Book 1 is by Dayton. right? And then there's there's book 2 by James Swallow, who's really, really nice guy, really a good author.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and then there's book 3 by David Mack. And what this does is it ties up the entire Star Trek timeline. So that's a great place to start. But then you could find things in there and go all the way back. I mean, their work goes back 10, 15, 20 years. And you could pick any place in their work. Also, William Shatner himself did some stuff with Judith and Reeves and Garth Stevens, which I thought was very entertaining. You could go way back and you could actually read the Star Trek Strange New World contest, which were just short stories. If you're into short stories, Keith DeCandrio has done some work. There's some really good work Keith DeCandrio has done. There's just so much work. There's just so much that you could literally. I think you could probably read Star Trek literature for a good 6 months and be excited and have nothing to want for a good 6 months straight. You know.
No, that's, and for yourself working on this, was this a labor of love then for you? Like, was that like sort of anything? I'm always hesitant because I teach in animation, and so that sounds like a wonderful subject and exciting. But at the end of the day, work is work as well. But for something like this, it must have been great. Like the research must have been dip back into old episodes. And how did you go about researching for this project? Did you have access to any additional archives, or interview any cast members or actors to see if they had any input? How was that? Or was it just you just decided to go in with your own kind of direction?
Well, I'll answer the last part first. No, I didn't interview anyone. But Titan and CBS gave me free reign, and they said basically, actually at the beginning they had an idea of how they wanted to approach the storyline, and how they wanted to approach the biography. And I said that I thought that their idea was really a great one, but I had a different idea, and so I presented my idea, and they were like, "Oh, that's good too," you know. Um, and I figured, hey, this is the moment to present, what I wanted to offer, and they liked what I had to offer, and they said, "Okay, we'll go with that." So we went with the idea I had, and then I created the outline for that, and I have about I think somewhere probably between 50 and 100 Easter eggs, Star Trek Easter eggs, in my in the biography. So that tells you the kind of research I did.
This is going to be now months of people messaging you every time they found one now.
Oh, I'm sure people will, right? And please, I want people to message me and let me know. Some are subtle, some are very subtle, and some are just right in your face. Um, but it was a joy. Of course, it's a joy, and at the same time, there were moments that it felt a little overwhelming. So what I did right away was I just packed all of that feeling of how overwhelming it can feel, and how all of, how much it could like almost be smothering, and I packed it away and just put it away and just said, this is a project and I need to get this project done, and stop thinking about that it's that Benjamin Sisko is an icon, and it's Star Trek, and you just do the work. And I think if you just do the work and focus on the work, then all of that anxiety and all that just goes away, and you just focus on the work. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And it's always interesting I'm talking to a number of different authors over the weekend as well, and some in pre-record. And I was saying the same to Dr. Travis Langley, who wrote this series of books. It began with Batman and psychology, and I was just asking the same question. Yeah, it's so good. And I was just like, what's the research like? But it must have been fun just to go in and read back over the old issues. And I think he was saying he spent like months trying to track back when was the Joker first called the Clown Prince of Crime, and that type of research, but I'm like, that must be so much better than, there's other types of research, which could just you just be going nuts trying to complete. And just we kind of touched upon it, but in terms of Star Trek becoming more accessible, because this is a franchise that is over 50 years old now, and so much has changed in terms of like technology, and it's gone on to inspire, like art reflecting life and vice versa, inspiring tech. And also there's been changes in taste, delivery, so much. And it seems very much that with this, your point of view, and it seems to be with these series of books, it's helping to make, Star Trek more accessible to new audiences and old audiences alike, new and old fans. But what other avenues would you turn to, like, just as a fan yourself? Then because you have experience in Star Trek outside of novels as well. There's a game background as well, if I'm correct. So what is that like, writing for the game side of things as well as prose? What's your take in the Star Trek world when it comes to that?
Well, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because to date, I believe I'm the only writer of color to have written for Star Trek in 3 different mediums now. So I've written short story, I've written in the RPG, and now long form.
Awesome.
And they're all different. They're all different. So short story, of course, and first of all, I should say, I'm blessed and thankful for to be touching anything that says Star Trek, right? Because it's a 50-year franchise, and the history and the hope of that, and what it stands for. Now, saying that, you have to know Star Trek. You have to know it backwards and forward. You have to be an expert in Star Trek to write it. Writing for Star Trek short story is very difficult, because you usually have 7,500 words or thereabouts, and you got to tell a cohesive, tight story that anyone reading that can identify with Star Trek can grab onto it and enjoy it. So that's really hard. Long form is actually, at least for me, a little bit easier, because you have more time. You can take your time and tell a cohesive story. However, writing in Benjamin Sisko's voice was challenging at first, but then once I realized that, hey, I'm writing in his voice and his mind, and I'm doing what he would want to do. I'm saying what he would want to say, not necessarily what the fans would want to hear from Sisko, but what Sisko wants to say. And once I did that, I started to just soar. And when you write for a role-playing game, and a Star Trek role-playing game, it has to be very open-ended, because you don't want to dictate to people what to do. You must do this thing. You must do that thing. You want to give them a set of options. And the beauty about Star Trek Adventures, which is the role-playing game, is that it's very inviting. And I think for the most part, people play Starfleet officers, but now you can play pretty much anything. You can play a Klingon, you can play an Orion, you can play, I think now you can even play a Borg. You can play pretty much anything, but you have to give people options, and you don't want to dictate. You want to present a problem and allow the players to approach that problem in their own unique way, and see how they will address and solve that problem. And so when you write, that's what you have to do. And my first long form writing as a kid, when I started to first tell and write stories, it was in the role-playing setting. So for me, it's like coming full circle.
That's amazing. And when you mentioned about the RPG games, my mind was traveling back to, have you seen are you up to date on Lower Decks?
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember the episode with the Klingon? I don't know if you noticed, but some of the animation for that takes place over here in Ireland. There's a studio down in Kilkenny. Yeah. It's gas. They do a lot of the rigging. Animation's a huge industry over here. It's been booming the last while, but then it's gas. I'm seeing folks in other counties so excited to see their names in the Star Trek credits.
Right, of course, right.
And but no, that's fantastic. And in terms of the guys, sorry, who with the RPG games, which publisher did you work with on those?
That's with Modifius. Modifius has the license for Star Trek, and what's so cool with Modifius is they have now acquired the license. They hold the license for Star Trek in itself, but also for Star Trek with Discovery, Star Trek with Lower Decks, I believe Star Trek with Picard as well, and just Star Trek in general. So with TOS and Next Gen as well. So they have the majority of Star Trek at this point. I think they don't have like the television show Strange New Worlds. They don't have that as yet, as far as I understand. But they have so much of the Star Trek universe that players can just dive in at any point, and it's so immersive. I myself have written for them. I've done the Cleon Worlds for Modifius Star Trek Adventures. I've written the Voyager, the Delta Quadrant worlds that in the Delta Quadrant book. There was an original book that Modifius created in the Star Trek universe called the Shackleton Expanse, which was a new section licensed by CBS, which was just a great area that Jim Johnson, who was the managing editor, Dayton Ward, Kelly Fitzpatrick, Scott Pearson, and myself, we created, and there was several other writers. And what we did is we all created this area of space with new aliens, 4 players to play. And you could just, it was an entire book, and you can just play this. You can just play this whole book. Probably take you a year to finish the whole book. And here it is. And it's really a great. It's really a great book, the Shackleton Expanse, and it's very cool. Modifius is doing some really great things with Star Trek Adventures. I can't say enough good things about them.
That's awesome, and you put me up to shame. I have my background blurred out, and you have the bookcase and everything. I really need to have the bookcase stood up. You know, for me, I was interviewing Andrea Romano from a voice director behind so many from BTAS onwards, and from The Office, the same Office. But I had the intercom phone on a hook, so since then I've blurred my background because I said that just looks so distracting every time I watch it back.
That's fine.
But it's you have the perfect, and I can see is that Eagle Moss, or is it now Master? I forgot. I think they changed now to Masterpiece or something like that. But that's an Eagle Moss, is it, in the background?
Yeah. I've got all kinds of stuff, man. I've got an Enterprise model. But my girlfriend got me a Millennium Falcon. I've got a little bit of everything. I just have a little bit of everything. I love it all. I love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. So I have a little bit of everything. I have an old Lost in Space robot. I have a little bit of everything. So yeah, I just love it all.
It is interesting though, since you brought it up, I feel comfortable because you mentioned Star Wars before me, so I know I can.
Okay, yeah, bring
it. But it was you mentioned that we spoke briefly there about Star Trek Coda bringing everything, because obviously CBS and everyone's bringing since Discovery, the timeline has it even mentioned in this season of Strange New World, they've brought up the timeline and stuff, and they have temporal effects,
right?
But then Coda was great because they had this continuity of novels going back, decades, and contributors, and they allowed them to bring that kind of branched off into its own continuity, and they're able to give the writers and the artists a kind of conclusion point then to bring that continuity to a close for those who follow the novels. And it seems very well received by anyone I know who's been reading it. Absolutely. But it's curious though, with Star Wars, they kind of they went slightly different, where they seem to have categorized it as, and I'm not as well read in Star Wars, but they have like legends, is it? And they separated the continuity. I just wonder, this is pure speculation on my part, but I wonder if the Star Trek guys are kind of looking over the shoulder at the Star Wars guys to see what they were doing in terms of how to bring it to a close. But with regards to the Star Wars novels, have you ever, like, are you a fan of those as well in terms of media yourself when reading them, or you know, as you said, you have a little bit of everything. So any favorites on that side?
Yeah, I am definitely a fan of the Star Trek novels. Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire blew me away. I remember I found the first one at a friend's house. I was waiting for him to, like, he was changing clothes or something, and he had like the first one, and I started reading it, and we were supposed to go out, and I'm like, I can't leave your house. He's like, what? I'm like, this is so good. And I stayed and read the whole one that day. And then it was like the first, and the other two had already come out. And I proceeded to, like, go to the bookstore, and it was like I think that was like a Friday or a Saturday. And I went to the bookstore, bought the other two, and read them, you know, and did nothing that weekend. So yeah, I'm definitely very much a really big Star Wars novel fan. Going back to Alan Dean Forster and Splinter the Mind's Eye, you know, from that, you know, and Han Solo, Lost Legacy, and all that. I would love to, you know, write a Star Wars novel. Oh my God, that's another dream. Because those two franchises, I grew up on them. You know, I grew up on them, and you want to do, you know, if you're so blessed, you want to do honor to what you're blessed with. You know, if you're, you know, just like I'm been blessed to write the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko. If I was ever given a chance, I would want to be blessed and do honor to that. But yeah, it's phenomenal work. Now I don't know, you know, the choices that have been made, or which Star Wars, I don't know. I think maybe in regards to the Star Trek guys, I know that they read a lot of comics and stuff, and so I feel that a lot of what's happening with what happened with Coda, it feels a lot of like Crisis on Infinite Earths, you know, which I think is a great idea and a great take, because Crisis was a really phenomenal event, and to kind of look at that and say, well, you know, that's something that we maybe can borrow and put into the Star Trek universe and make it uniquely our own, because Coda felt a little bit like that. But then at the same time, didn't feel like it was being copied or mimicked in any way. So I really loved that idea, and I can't speak a lot to what's happening with, you know, Star Wars. So, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And you actually mentioned just a little bit there in passing the comic books as well, particularly with Star Trek. And I know over in IDW, I think it's Hedda Atos is the editor over the series, but it seems to be really well received at the moment. In fact, Eisner nominations, which I think is a first for the franchise. Have you been following the Star Trek comics yourself?
Have been, and I've been blown away because they're doing some phenomenal work. And you read it and you're like, oh wow, it's Star Trek. And that's what blows me away, is that every iteration I look at, it's Star Trek. They found the way, every iteration, whether it's Modiphius, IDW, Titan, Pocket Books, you know, everyone is finding their niche and finding their way to give the audience Star Trek in their own unique way. And I love that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned your start, like, so your start into the writing for Star Trek kind of began with the short story competitions as well. Now, this be of particular interest for me to explore, because the room in which we're going to be broadcasting these panels at the show is it's basically sponsored by Pulse College, Games and Animation College in Dublin I work with. So we like to lend everything towards particular focus, maybe towards, let's say, not academic per se, but students in particular, I find, can be a shy bunch when we encourage them to go in for competitions, because they always have a mentality of, oh, why put all the work in? It's never going to be me. It's never going to be picked, and so on and so forth. For yourself, having, you know, submitted for the competition and being successful as well, what would you say to folks who might be watching this video later who might be considering, it doesn't necessarily have to be Star Trek, even sci-fi, but maybe entering in for writing competitions. What do you say? Would you encourage them to go for it? Was it a lucky break the first? Well, obviously not a lucky break, because obviously you know Evan crafts the story, but just was it first time successful when you submitted, or did you enter into other competitions before you got to the point, you know, that you know saw a winning entry?
I'm really that's a really great question. I'm glad you asked me, and I'm happy to talk about it. That was also my first professional sale and as a writer. So what happened was, before that, I had written at 16. I had written a screenplay in high school that won an award with the Writers Guild of America. So I knew I had some talent and could write, but I really didn't, you know, I putzed around and I didn't really, you know, I really couldn't, to be quite honest, I really couldn't afford. I applied for NYU Tisch School of Arts, couldn't afford it. So I knew I had this ability, but I didn't really know what to do with it, right? So a friend of mine was like, "Oh, they got this thing, they got this contest. Maybe you should enter. It's a Star Trek contest." I'm like, "I like Star Trek." So I did my research because one thing I've always been taught, you know, anything you want to do, if you're going to do anything professional, it has to look professional. It has to be professional. You can't half step or do anything half baked. So I did my research. I created an outline, created a story that I thought had a chance of. I wasn't really necessarily thinking about winning, but I was thinking I wanted a story that would get read, you know. And so I crafted the story. I wrote it. I was meticulous with it. I read all of what they wanted, and I adhered to their guidelines. I didn't do what I necessarily. I did what I wanted to do, but within their guidelines. I didn't ignore the guidelines, because if you ignore the guidelines, then the editor is not going to read your story, you know? And so I did what I wanted to do within their guidelines, sent it within the deadline. And to be quite honest, I forgot about it, because I think after it's sent, if you dwell on it, I think that's not necessarily healthy. It's sent, it's out of your hands. It's like a child, you know, you nurture the child, you've raised the child, let the child go. It now has to speak for itself on its own. You know, you can no longer speak for it. You can no longer explain to people, oh, I meant to put this comment here, or I meant to put that line. You can't do that anymore. It now has to speak for itself. So think about that before you send it, and then send it and just let it go. And I did that. And honestly, I'd forgotten about it. And I was off to like thinking about anything else I was going to write. I wasn't really thinking about other contests, because I was just so raw and fresh as a writer, you know. So several months later, I got a call and said, "Hey, your story got into Star Trek: Strange New Worlds." And I was like, "What?" and they said, "And it took first place." And I was like, "Wow!" I was blown away. And at that time, I was really happy, but it reaffirmed that I had the ability to write, but I did not know a lot about the business of writing. So between 2005 and 2016, I really took the time to try and learn the business of writing, so that if I was ever fortunate to hit again, I would know more about the business of writing and use my skill to move myself into a different position, if that makes sense.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm actually that bit you were saying about, you know, just let go. It's like a baby let go. I'm actually going to steal that for the graduation speech later.
Yeah.
That was perfect, because often I see it with students with the final submissions, and that's amazing what you mentioned about the business of writing as well, because what we teach here as well, and it's something that, you know, my students probably are less than enthused by, but it's so essential, is we teach entrepreneurship and business-based modules, like writing your business plan, you know, brand and marketing, how to promote yourself, your reputation, your, like, for many people, the greatest asset that they have in the creative enterprise isn't about how much money per se in the bank, but it's about, well, what do folks say about you when
Right.
you're not in the room, you know? And that's the important aspect. So so it's so I'm so relieved every time I interview folks from industry, and they're also like, yes, these principles still are out there. They're still, it's the same rule for all of us when we're going out and participating in industry and submitting material. No, that's fantastic. And thanks so much for imparting that as well, because I do know, hopefully, even if it's just one person, you know, after seeing this, go, you know what, maybe I will submit for that competition. That's all it takes, you know.
No, submit. Yeah, definitely submit. And a lot of what I've learned over the years is just, you know, be a decent human. That will carry you a long way. There's nothing wrong with saying please and thank you. Be a decent human. If you don't know, there's no shame in saying I don't know. You know, I've gotten very far with saying, hey, I don't know. Can you explain this thing to me? And then once you know, I never try and close the door once I've gotten through a door, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. You know, leave that door open for the next person, and I think that's you know, that's all you can really do, right? I mean, just be a decent human, and then as you learn things, if somebody else asks you, tell them. It's not gonna. It's not. I'm never. I always say the only person that I am in constant competition with is myself. I'm in competition with the Derek from yesterday and the Derek for tomorrow. I'm not in competition with anyone else, because that's nuts, you know? So that's my personal philosophy.
You know, it actually very much reflects something I'm always saying to students, which is, we're not here to make you the best. We're here to make you the best you can be. You know, that's pretty much it. And isn't that what's so appealing about Star Trek, though? Isn't that the underlying philosophy, though? It's just that it's like in the future they've no currency. It's just they want to be the best they can be, and they've get over so much. Like there's a lot to be said for the philosophy, that idea that goes back to Gene Roddenberry, I suppose.
It does.
And as a writer, how did you ever find that, where I don't know if those rules still apply, or what the approach is, but back in the early days, Gene Roddenberry was saying there can be no conflict, you know, at least internally, right? Because the Earth has kind of, you know, all united now, and it's kind of like they take the good word out into space now with the Federation. But did you ever play in that type of a sandbox, or did you have more freedom in prose short fiction approach, particularly with the role-playing game? That must have been interesting when it comes to conflict.
Yeah, it was definitely in regards to conflict. I think, well, first of all, let's just all say that Gene Roddenberry, the great bird of the galaxy, is a visionary, creating a utopia or protopia that we can all wrap our heads around and aspire towards and strive towards, which is great. For me personally, I've looked at the 50 years of Star Trek and all those iterations, including Deep Space Nine. And for me personally, I think there are 4 foundations to every episode of Star Trek that identify it as Star Trek, that you'll find in every series, every book, every comic, every series. Hope, friendship, science, and exploration. If you think about every episode, everything you've watched, everything that's Star Trek, you'll find those 4 pillars in those 4 things. And when you don't, it's not really Star Trek. And so what I've done in the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko is incorporate those into that book. And sometimes the exploration may not be without, it may be within, but it's still exploration. And you can have conflict, but there are different types of conflict. You know, sometimes the conflict is with yourself. It's not maybe, you know, with going without, but you can have all different kinds of conflict. I think we're really used to external conflicts as opposed to internal conflicts. I think Gene, or I should say Mr. Roddenberry, was really looking towards a lot of internal conflicts. I think that's what he really focused on with Spock, you know, being half Vulcan, half human. He was really concerned about those internal conflicts, and the whole Kirk, Spock, McCoy triumvirate really explored that, you know, the mind, the body, and the heart, right? That's what those 3 were. but I really think that you can definitely do conflict with Star Trek, and as Star Trek expands and we explore, which is another pillar, as we explore out further, then we can bring those on the outside, and we can see how their visions interact and conflict with our visions of what the future and peace and reality should be.
Yeah, no, and that's like it that has been, if you talk to a true, I shouldn't say that everyone's a Star Trek fan, wherever it is, like what constitutes as being a true fan. But anyone I know who's a fan of Star Trek, that's always the bit that resonates with them the most, because there's a friend of mine, John Sutchers, who was saying, I think it was his nephew when he was younger, was like, when he was sitting watching an old Star Trek, was like, what's going on here? It's just, they're just talking. There's no lasers. There's no fight. And he goes, no, that's what Star Trek is. But then, and for me, I have to admit, I remember I was saying that for me, the entry point was, David A. Goodman's Autobiography of James T. Cook. That was my entry point. But I was aware of Star Trek beforehand. And I even remember seeing TOS episodes and reruns on TV before. But I definitely, when I was younger, it didn't click with me. And then when I was older, I was like, yeah, it just sings with me. And there's a funny story I'm reminded of, which is a friend of mine, Mark Hall, whose grandfather, when he was sick in hospital, was watching old, it must have been like a black and white TV, old Star Trek episodes. Right. And he turned around and he was saying, put that Navy show on. And then he went, that's Star Trek. But, God bless him, but like the military procedure, but it just sang to everyone, And then I realized, yeah, when you're that much older, you get it then. And there's a real humor as well to the series, isn't there? That you don't realize on the surface and you get to it.
Yeah.
But we're actually going to be coming up to time now, okay. Unfortunately, because we're doing a pre-recording this, but if I know future me, he's already setting the stage for the next. So I'll say hi to future on at this stage. But before we bring anything to a wrap, I just want to just double check all the details. The Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, where release date, and where can folks pre-order? Is pre-order available yet? Or
pre-order is available now. It comes out on October 10th, but you can pre-order now. There is a QR code that is available on Titan Books. It's available on pretty much anywhere I am on social media. I have the cover of the book with the QR code, and you can use that to pre-order. I'll send you an image, and you maybe post that, and you can just pre-order. And the pre-order is available internationally.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a international pre-order. And so just order it. Just order it.
Would it be available? It's coming out in hardback first, is it?
I believe so. I believe it's available hardback and also e-reader.
Oh, excellent. That's going to be my second one. And I suppose you don't have to answer anything or say anything while I ask this one, but is there any preliminary discussions of audiobooks as well? Or just
This is the question I'm asking more than anything else. It's going to be an audiobook, and is Mr. Avery Brooks going to do it? All I can say, that's above my security clearance. I don't know. I don't know.
I blame Kate Milgrew. She doing it for everyone.
Exactly. I was just at Gen Con, and this young lady came up to me. She said, "Yes, I'm ordering the book. Yes, I don't want to talk about it. All I want to know is Avery Brooks doing the audio book?" I said, "I don't know." She said, "Okay, I'll buy it. Thank you," and walked away. It was great. It was great.
That's amazing. I think like fans will literally lose their minds if that happened. But like for me,
I would lose my mind. Are you kidding me? Yeah, I don't know though. I don't know.
But for me, I'm genuinely excited for the book. Like I cannot stress how much I've enjoyed thoroughly this entire series, and I was so excited when I seen the announcement. And literally, I think as soon as the announcement was made, I I found you on Twitter, and like it was great that we could connect, or X now, whatever it is, whatever day in the future it's called. But it was like, so it's been fantastic, and thank you so much. You've been so accessible, so ready with your time, and hopefully we get more conversations like this in the future. If you can, I'd love to have another conversation after the release where we can probably discuss more.
Right, and we can talk about everything.
Yeah. That'd be it. I can.
Right.
But no, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you over here as well, Dublin, some stage. It'd be great if we can make something like that possible.
I would love to. It'd be great, and it'd be great to meet you in person. It'd be fantastic, man.
That's great. So thank you once more, Derek. And 10th of October, and available pre-order now, and I'll get the QR code out to everyone at the show as well.
And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All the best. Cheers.